What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School by Mark H. McCormack. Picture this. It's 1963, and you're sitting at a table in Paris during a world-class golf tournament. A well-dressed man approaches, pleasant, recognizable, someone who'll one day become President of the United States, Richard Nixon. He exchanges a few pleasantries with the golfers at your table, maybe 5 or 6 sentences, then moves on with a smile. Fast forward a few days. You're having dinner with legends like Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. Incredibly, Nixon appears again at your table. Same greeting, same smile, and word for word, the exact same sentences he delivered before, like a recording on repeat. Mark McCormack would later remember feeling like Nixon was addressing stick figures, not actual human beings. Now contrast that with another moment. There's this flamboyant golfer named Doug Sanders, someone many people thought was too risky, too controversial to represent. McCormack took him on anyway. After Sanders arranged and played in a small exhibition tournament in Canada, an envelope showed up at McCormack's office a week later. No letter, no note, just cash. Their commission from the event, sent without being asked. A future president who sounded robotic, and a golf hustler who acted with absolute integrity. What do these moments reveal? Everything. They expose a fundamental truth about success that's powerful enough to build empires, yet so subtle it's never taught in even the most prestigious business schools. This is the world of street smarts, and nobody mastered it better than Mark H. McCormack. Sports Illustrated called McCormack, quote, the most powerful man in sports. He never went to Harvard Business School. In fact, he started International Management Group, or IMG, on a handshake with less than $500. He essentially invented the entire sports management industry. Today, IMG is a global giant with thousands of employees across dozens of countries. His book, What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School, became an international bestseller, not because it's packed with complex theories, but because it contains something far more valuable, the unwritten rules of the game. The secrets of human nature that let you read people, shape how they see you, and gain a subtle edge in every interaction. So for the next while, forget about textbooks and balance sheets. Lean in and listen closely, because I'm about to share the wisdom of someone who understood that business situations at their core always come down to people. By the end, you'll grasp the subtle art of applied people sense, the one skill that can take you from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. Let's start with the most important lesson you'll ever learn, the foundation for everything else in business and life. It's something McCormack learned not in a classroom, but from watching people in their most unguarded moments. The best education you can get doesn't come from a master's degree. It doesn't come from a law degree, though McCormack had one from Yale. The real education, the one separating good from great, is awareness of what school can't teach you. It's the ability to actively use your instincts, insights, and perceptions. McCormack called it street smarts. I like to call it applied people sense. Think back to those opening stories. Richard Nixon revealed something troubling by repeating the same lines verbatim, a phoniness that spoke volumes about his character. People don't like phonies. They don't trust them. A decade later, that very quality would contribute to his downfall. Then there was Doug Sanders, the golfer everyone warned McCormack about. He could have easily pocketed that exhibition cash, and nobody would have known. But he didn't. Sending his commission in cash, without even a note, was so deeply ingrained in who he was that nothing else would have occurred to him. He was a man of his word, even when no one was watching. McCormack is telling us something profound here. In business, it's easy to put on a mask. We have our corporate persona, different faces for our boss, our colleagues, our clients. But your real self, your true nature, can't change. Eventually, in any ongoing relationship, you'll deal with that person's real self. The sooner you see it, the more effective you'll be. So how do you do it? How do you learn to see what's really there, hear what's really being said? It starts with 3 powerful actions: listening aggressively, observing aggressively, and talking less. Let's start with listening. Most of us don't really listen. We're busy waiting for our turn to talk, planning what we'll say next. Aggressive listening is different. It's about hearing not just what someone says, but how they say it. People reveal so much more than they intend to. McCormack shares a great story about Pepsi. For years, they desperately tried getting their drinks into Burger King, but Burger King had a contract with Coke. Pepsi's pitch focused on giving consumers choice. Have it your way, they argued, echoing Burger King's own slogan. But Burger King kept refusing. Time and again, they explained their philosophy was a limited menu, including only one cola. For months, Pepsi pushed the same choice angle, months of going nowhere. They were talking, but not listening. Finally, someone at Pepsi caught on. They changed their entire pitch. They stopped talking about choice and started framing it as a partnership of number twos going after number ones, Pepsi and Burger King versus Coke and McDonald's. Someone at Burger King smiled and said, we've been trying to tell you that for months. Glad someone finally listened. They got the contract. Aggressive listening isn't passive. It's actively searching for meaning behind words. Sometimes the most powerful tool is silence. Just pause a few seconds after someone finishes speaking. That slightly uncomfortable silence often makes them say more. They feel compelled to fill the void, and in doing so, they might reveal what you really need to know. Next comes observing aggressively. McCormack would fly great distances just to meet someone face to face, even when business could be handled by phone. Why? Because the impression you get meeting someone in person is completely different. You see things you can't hear. Observation isn't just about body language, though that's part of it. It's taking in the whole picture. How does someone dress? Is their office meticulously organized or creatively messy, filled with personal photos, or sterile and impersonal? Is their casualness a little too calculated? Do they lean in on your every word like an old-school salesman? These are conscious statements people make about themselves. An office cluttered with diplomas and awards might signal a need for validation. Someone whose posture is too perfect, too rigid, might care more about appearances than actual accomplishment. McCormack says people like this make him nervous. They're more likely interested in looking good than performing well. But the most revealing arena is the eyes. Eyes tell you what someone's really thinking, even when everything else points elsewhere. Next time you're in a group meeting, notice people's eye contact with each other. It helps you figure out who holds real influence, what they're actually thinking, and whether you're boring them to death. The final piece is simple: talk less. If you're listening and observing aggressively, you'll naturally talk less. You'll learn more, see more, and make fewer mistakes. Ask questions, then resist the urge to answer them yourself. Just listen. Combining these three skills develops real insight into people. You start seeing beyond the corporate persona to understand their true nature. This gets interesting because a person's true nature is consistent. The better you know someone, the more accurately you can predict how they'll react in almost any situation. This knowledge is invaluable. It's what allows you to understand the single most powerful force in any business interaction: ego. McCormack says most successful businessmen are one giant ego with a couple of arms and legs sticking out. But a giant ego doesn't necessarily mean a strong one. Often it means the opposite: deep insecurity, a need to be assertive because of low self-image. Once you can read someone's ego strength, you can answer practical questions. How secure is this person? Will they be stubborn or reasonable? How quickly will they decide, and will they stick to it? Will form matter more than substance? Are they likely to say one thing and do another? This isn't about judging people. It's about understanding them. Someone with a massive, fragile ego might need stroking. You might need to make them feel your great idea was really theirs all along. Many deals happen simply because someone's ego was so involved, they psychologically couldn't afford for it not to work. If you can understand and manage ego by stroking it, challenging it, or minimizing its damage, you can benefit from many of those deals. But here's the thing: the biggest block to your insight into others is your own ego. It's hard to be effective if your conclusions about someone else are based on your ego rather than theirs. Be aware of your own strengths and weaknesses and how they might slant your reactions. So you've learned to read people. You're listening, observing, understanding ego's role. That's half the equation. The other half is controlling their reading of you. This is the art of creating impressions. How people relate to you in business is based on the conscious and unconscious statements you make about yourself. How you dress, your phone manner, how you greet people, even how you phrase a letter. All of it affects the impression you make. McCormack calls this an artful form of manipulation. It's about making people want to do what you want them to do. And it's all in the little things. Business rarely provides for grand gestures. Just as you gain the greatest insights from little things people say and do, it's the little things you say and do that make the most enduring impression. McCormack is bad with names and assumes everyone else is too. So no matter how many times he's met someone, if he's not 100% sure they know his name, he opens with, "I'm Mark McCormack." It's a minor point, but it removes any potential awkwardness and makes the other person comfortable. He tells a wonderful story about Ray Cave, managing editor of Time magazine. They went to a restaurant where Cave had never eaten. When they arrived, Cave greeted the maître d' warmly. "Good to see you again." The maître d' lit up and immediately led them to a great table. It was simple and subtle, but created an instant positive impression. Another colleague, a managing editor at People magazine, told him that if she anticipated being intimidated at a business lunch, she'd order a scotch and water. She rarely drinks, but ordering scotch instead of sparkling water creates a subtle, business impression. One of the most effective ways to create an impression is doing the opposite of what someone expects. If they're expecting toughness, a simple self-effacing remark can be incredibly disarming. If they anticipate a hard line in negotiation, making a small, insignificant concession right at the beginning can change the entire dynamic. McCormack says the more someone thinks he wants something from them, the more he'll appear that he doesn't. He once wanted to sign a well-known television personality who was hesitant. She knew how badly they wanted her and expected the full-court press. Instead, in 2 meetings, McCormack talked about her career, her opportunities, what he'd do in her shoes. He never once mentioned representation. Naturally, she started wondering why they weren't pursuing her more aggressively, and she began pursuing them. Your correspondence is another powerful tool. McCormack is a stickler for any letter going out over his name. It must be neatly typed, with no spelling errors or typos. It forms a strong subliminal impression about how you run your business. Do you run it almost right, or do you run it right? He also personalizes all his business correspondence. He'll add a sentence or two about a personal interest, asking about their favorite sports team, a recent business deal, or even their family. It shows you've done your homework. It shows you care. Think about your office environment, too. Your secretary is often your official link to the outside world. If she's abrupt, you're perceived as abrupt. If she's officious and overbearing, you're perceived as officious and overbearing. The same goes for any subordinate working directly for you. You're being judged, at least partly, by how they present themselves. And then there's how you present yourself. How you dress forms an immediate, strong impression. Generally, it's better to dress conservatively. The more conservative your business dress, the harder you are to read. People showing up with shirts half unbuttoned and gold chains exposed create all sorts of disturbing assumptions about their entire personality. Coco Chanel once said, if a woman is poorly dressed, you notice her dress, but if she's impeccably dressed, you notice the woman. That same advice applies to business. You want your dress to say nothing about you, except that your clothes fit. Another powerful impression maker is split-second efficiency. In any new business relationship, McCormack creates situations allowing him to be perfectly on time. If he sets up a call for 10 a.m., he calls at precisely 10 a.m. If he promises a letter will be on someone's desk by Monday, it's there Monday. Do this the first few times you deal with someone, and they'll assume you conduct all your business that way. The flip side is being a time thief. The quickest way to make a lasting negative impression is wasting someone's time. Don't set up a meeting just to make a contact. A contact worth having will respond to your, "I just wanted to meet you," by making sure you never meet again. And if you have someone in your office, don't take prolonged phone calls. It's exasperating. Excuse yourself and keep it short, or just say, "I'm in a meeting. May I call you back?" All these small things, your punctuality, correspondence, dress, manners, add up. They create an overall, ongoing impression of competence, effectiveness, and fair-minded toughness. This is the kind of person people want to do business with. When you create that impression, people forgive the occasional mistake. They overlook imperfections because their overall, lasting impression of you is favorable. Now let's talk about where this all comes together. You've learned to read people and shape their impressions of you. Next is using that information to tilt a business situation slightly to your advantage. This is what McCormack calls taking the edge. Taking the edge is the gamesmanship of business. It's not about being greedy or pushy. It's about winning through intuition, figuring out what people want or convincing them of what they want, then finding a way to give it to them while getting slightly more in return. In any business situation, there's an edge for the taking. First step is knowing the particulars. Do your homework. You can't take an edge until you've looked at the facts. Assume the one fact you don't know is the one that'll make all the difference. But facts alone aren't enough. You have to size up the situation, step back, and see what opportunities exist. One brilliant example comes from a Venezuelan oil and shipping businessman named Rafael Tudela. In the mid-1960s, Tudela owned a glass manufacturing company but dreamed of getting into oil. He learned Argentina was about to buy $20 million of butane gas. With no experience and no connections in the oil business, he flew to Argentina to try securing the contract. His competition? British Petroleum and Shell Oil, two of the biggest companies in the world. He was hopelessly outmatched, but he did his homework. He started asking questions and listening, and he discovered one critical fact. Argentina had a massive beef oversupply they desperately wanted to sell. That one fact was his edge. He went to the Argentine government with an offer they couldn't refuse. "If you'll buy $20 million of butane from me," he said, "I'll buy $20 million of beef from you." Argentina gave him the contract. Now he had a new problem, what to do with $20 million of beef. So he flew to Spain, where a major shipyard was about to close due to lack of work, creating a political crisis. He told them, "If you'll buy $20 million of beef from me, I'll build a $20 million supertanker in your shipyard." The Spanish government was ecstatic. Finally, he flew to Philadelphia, to Sun Oil Company. He told them, "If you'll charter my brand new $20 million supertanker, I'll buy $20 million of butane gas from you." Sun Oil agreed. In a series of brilliant moves, Rafael Tudela built an entire business from scratch. He started with nothing but an idea. He did his homework, understood what each party desperately wanted, and found a way to give it to them. He was a master at taking the edge. Sometimes taking the edge requires thinking on your feet. An opportunity might appear for only a split second, and if you don't grab it, it vanishes forever. McCormack's team was meeting with McDonald's to renew their sponsorship of the World Triathlon Championship. But the mood was off. McDonald's seemed reluctant. They'd just committed huge money to building the swimming pool for the 1984 Olympics, and that preoccupied all their thoughts. The triathlon deal was dying. But the head of television sales sensed something else. He sensed there was still a mood to buy something. The momentum was there, but it wouldn't last a second longer than that meeting. So out of the blue, he switched gears entirely. He suggested maybe the triathlon idea had run its course. What they should really discuss, he proposed, was an all-new event. an international diving championship taking place every year at McDonald's brand new Olympic pool. Because that one executive understood the ripeness of the moment, they didn't walk out with a failure, they walked away with a brand new commitment. This is what people often call luck. But luck, as Gary Player once said, is a funny thing. The harder I practice, the luckier I get. Getting lucky is mostly recognizing when you have been. Even a crisis can be an opportunity. People see crises only in terms of potential disaster. But in a crisis, people are on edge, agitated, more vulnerable. And that vulnerability can become a great advantage. McCormack says one of his best rules is, when a crisis occurs, don't react. Just say you'd like to think about it. Make an excuse, but don't respond immediately. Once you've analyzed the crisis for its potential opportunity as well as disaster, then respond. It may present a very interesting edge. Perhaps the most powerful tool for taking the edge is also the most difficult to master: patience, learning to wait. It's amazing how the simple passing of time can totally alter a situation. It can solve problems, cool down confrontations, add a whole new perspective. McCormack says in his 20-plus years in business, 90% of his successes involved the need for patience, and 90% of his failures were caused, in part, by a lack of it. This brings us to the arena where these skills are most tested: sales and negotiation. Most people think they can't sell. They find it intrusive, beneath them, and most of all, they fear rejection. But McCormack argues, we're all born salesmen. As kids, we sell our parents on letting us use the car. We sell our teachers on giving us good grades. We're unconsciously using persuasion and negotiation all the time. The problem is, once we enter the business world, our sales abilities are being judged, and that's intimidating. We convince ourselves we can't do it. But effective selling isn't about high-pressure, foot-in-the-door techniques. Those days are gone. Today, effective selling is directly tied to timing, patience, persistence, and sensitivity. If you feel like you're imposing, that's not a problem. It's an asset. It means you have a sixth sense for when timing is wrong. The best salespeople know when to back off and come back another day. The fear of rejection is real, but it helps. Remembering rejection in selling is rarely personal. It doesn't mean you have to like it. Acknowledge your feelings of frustration or anger, but don't let them stop you. Arnold Palmer, one of the most beloved athletes in history, cared so much about success that his fear of failure was immense. When he missed a crucial shot, you could see the pain on his face, and people loved him for it because they knew he cared. If you aren't afraid to fail, you probably don't care enough about success. When it comes to negotiation, people often think of it as a battle, a machismo showdown. McCormack sees it differently. He doesn't think of himself as a tough negotiator. He thinks of himself as an effective one. Negotiation isn't about making the other person back down. It's the last step in an ongoing sales effort, a process of reaching mutually advantageous agreement. He has a simple framework for any negotiation. There are 5 questions that must be answered: what, when, where, how exclusive, and how much. Don't get hung up on how much. Numbers are just one piece. If one person starts at 10 and another at 20, and you end up at 15, that's not negotiation. That's just splitting the difference. True negotiation is more intricate. One of his best pieces of advice: let the other guy go first with numbers. At the very least, it tells you what he's thinking. On many occasions, the other party's first offer has been higher than the closing figure McCormack had in mind. He also uses what he calls psychological currencies, deal points that seem innocent but have potent underlying impact. Early in his career, he was negotiating a contract for Gary Player with Slazenger. Slazenger wanted a 1-year contract. McCormack wanted long-term. They were at an impasse. So he came up with a brilliant solution. He proposed a contract terminable by either party from the moment it was signed, but on 5 years. Notice, His theory was Schlesinger would be so reluctant to terminate someone they'd still be affiliated with for another 5 years that they'd work extra hard to make sure it never happened. Gary Player's contract with Schlesinger is now in its 20th year. This is the art of mollifying, then modifying. Acknowledge the other party's feelings. It's the oldest psychological technique in the world. Say something like, "I know exactly what you mean, and I couldn't agree with you more, but..." That little word allows you to cancel out everything before it. You've accepted how they feel without committing to anything. And then there's the power of candor. When negotiations get tense, when they're in danger of falling through, a moment of simple honesty can be disarming. Just saying, "Look, I really want this to go through. This is very important to me," can bring back perspective and make a conciliation that seemed impossible just moments before suddenly seem possible. One memorable story comes not from McCormack but from his close friend, Australian media mogul Kerry Packer. David Frost was trying to sell Packer the Australian rights to his famous Nixon interview tapes. Frost wanted $175,000. Packer wouldn't go higher than $160,000. They argued back and forth, getting nowhere. Finally, in a moment of candor, Frost said, "Kerry, I really need the $175,000, and I'm sure the tapes are worth it." Packer was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I've got an idea, David. I have a coin right here. Let's flip for the difference. You call it." Frost, on the other end of the phone, hesitated. Finally, he said, "All right, heads." "You win," said Packer. Sometimes the best deal you can make for yourself is by driving a soft bargain. Where does your self-interest lie? In a short-term gain or a long-term relationship? These principles, reading people, creating impressions, taking the edge, and negotiating effectively, aren't just for making deals. They're for building a career and running a business. When it comes to getting ahead inside a company, you have to understand the rules of the game. It's a pyramid. There aren't as many presidents as vice presidents. This creates natural antagonism between different levels. You have to alert those several rungs above you to your talents without making enemies of people in between. You have to make the middle guys think that by supporting you they'll look better as managers. Meanwhile, you have to keep your peers as friends and maintain your subordinates' support. It's complicated, and it's one of those real-world concerns no textbook can prepare you for. McCormack shares 3 hard-to-say phrases most successful executives have mastered. First is, "I don't know." It's amazing how many people fear these words, thinking they'll appear inadequate. When McCormack first shook hands with Arnold Palmer, he made only 2 guarantees. First, if he didn't know something, he'd tell him. Second, when he didn't know something, he'd find someone who did. Not admitting what you don't know can lead to suspicion about what you do know. The second phrase is, "I need help." People are often afraid to ask for help because they think it shows weakness. But the whole corporate assumption is that some tasks are better achieved by groups. Asking for help is how you learn and expand your value to the company. The third phrase is, "I was wrong." People who are least secure have the hardest time admitting mistakes, but it's not the mistake that matters. It's how it's handled that forms the lasting impression. The ability to say, "I was wrong," is cathartic. It allows you to put mistakes behind you and move on. As you build a business, as McCormack did with IMG, these principles scale up. He built his empire by committing to quality from the beginning, signing the 3 best golfers in the world, Palmer, Player, and Nicklaus. He grew slowly, getting better before he got bigger. He diversified his expertise, moving from golf into other individual sports like auto racing and tennis. He hired the best people to teach him what he didn't know. He built a global network of offices long before it was fashionable, understanding that anything America had, the rest of the world would want. But as a business grows, it faces its biggest enemy, its own systems. Structures created to make things run smoothly begin stifling the very momentum they're supposed to help. Ford's structure was once described as a, quote, "wall of molasses." You can't get anything in, you can't get anything out. To combat this, you have to think small even as you get big. McCormack organized IMG into 12 smaller companies, each functioning as a separate profit center. It preserved the small feeling, the sense of immediacy and importance that makes people feel like what they do every day matters. You have to be willing to break out of your own systems, to punch holes in conventional wisdom. You have to manage with confidence, which means delegating. It takes a very confident person to be a good manager, to build up people, and then let go of responsibility. You have to hire people smarter than you are, and then sell your company, not yourself. And finally, if you're one of the few who wants to start your own business, you have to ask yourself the hard questions. Why are you really doing this? Is it to run away from your current job? Or is it because you have a deep emotional commitment to an idea, a feeling that if you never tried, you'd always regret it? Starting a business isn't for the faint of heart, but for those driven by that inner fire. It's the new American dream. What Mark McCormack offers and what they don't teach you at Harvard Business School is more than business tips. It's a philosophy. It's a way of looking at the world, grounded in deep understanding of human nature. Reading it today, decades after it was first published, you realize just how timeless this wisdom is. Technology has changed, markets have changed, but people haven't. The most powerful lesson for me is the idea of street smarts as applied people sense. It's not about being cunning or manipulative in a negative way. It's about being observant, empathetic, and aware. It's understanding that every interaction, whether with a CEO or a waiter, is an opportunity to learn something about character. McCormack reminds us the small, seemingly insignificant moments are often the most revealing. A person's true self doesn't change to suit the environment, and long-run success depends on your ability to see that true self in others and in yourself. This is a book that champions intuition in an age obsessed with data. McCormack isn't against facts, but he argues facts are just tools. They can't replace the seat-of-the-pants factor, that gut feeling telling you when timing is right, when to push, and when to be silent. He teaches that decisions are ultimately made with our hearts and instincts, and we use logic to justify them afterward. Truly great leaders don't just analyze data. They feel the decision. So how can you start applying this wisdom today? Here are a few simple, practical actions. First, for the next week, practice what McCormack calls aggressive listening. In every conversation, make it your goal to listen twice as much as you speak. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. Ask questions. Then be silent. Try understanding the other person's perspective so deeply you could argue their point for them. You'll be amazed at what you learn. Second, choose one small thing to create a better impression. It could be as simple as making sure your next email is perfectly proofread, or adding a personal, handwritten note to a thank you card. Or if you have a phone call scheduled, call at the exact time you said you would. These small acts of precision and care build a reputation for competence that's incredibly powerful over time. Finally, the next time you find yourself in a tense or emotional situation, remember McCormack's advice. Act, don't react. Before you respond, take a deep breath. Force yourself to step back, even for just a few seconds. This small pause gives you control. It allows you to move from being controlled by the situation to being the controller of it. It's a simple habit that can fundamentally change the outcome of your most difficult interactions. Ultimately, this book reminds us that no matter how complex business gets, it always comes down to one thing: people. And the person with the most finely tuned people sense will almost always have the edge. That was a summary of What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School by Mark H. McCormack. I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you make the journey yourself. The true magic of a book like this happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and every interaction you have. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.